For our second attempt at movie reviews, we're going to be reviewing the Alien franchise. Welcome to the HolmFront.
Gonna be this episode. That's all I was saying.
You just with the blanket back there, it's kind of giving you away. It's not working out. Hello, welcome to another episode of the HolmFront. We just got done watching Alien Romulus, the new one. We had referenced it in a previous episode, our Rotten Disparities episode of Prometheus and Covenant.
Mm-hmm.
And so I figured, just came out, why not? We'll just give it a try. So, what'd you think?
I'm fresh off the cuff here. I've not said a word to him about the movie.
Nope, I have no idea. I mean, I have some idea. I knew when I saw it what you were going to basically think.
Okay, so now I'm curious. So now I actually want to hear what you think that I think.
What I think that you think? Okay.
Because you saw this before me
I did.
a couple weeks ago. I saw it just now. Carried
Super
away.
fresh. Yeah. Well, I'll give kind of a brief, like, how I felt. I liked it
Okay.
when I watched it just because I liked a lot of elements that they used.
Okay.
Very classic looking. The world building is pretty interesting. The small bits that they have.
Yeah.
The style of it looks really great. That all being said, it's a very generic film, horror-wise and alien-wise. So I was like, okay, Mitch is not going to be very impressed by it. It's entirely predictable. Again, it suffers from that fate of the minute that you meet all the characters, you know which ones are going to make it.
Yeah.
At least you can narrow it down to a couple, and you're like, all right,
Mm-hmm.
there they are, cool. So I just don't get connected to anybody. And unfortunately, I mean, what do you do with that situation? But then there's properties that make their trope about not being able to tell. Like Game of Thrones is one. They get rid of their main character right off the bat.
Walking Dead is another good example because
Walking
that's
Dead.
a horror as well,
Right.
and you never know who's gonna make it in that.
Yeah, and so I think there's ways to do it. This one didn't employ any of them, so yeah, it was very generic. And it even played into a couple of tropes where I was like, all right, so that guy's probably going either now or directly after the first person.
Right.
Anyway, so that was what I thought you would think. You're gonna be very unimpressed and.
Well, you don't need me on the show because
Bada bing. All right, thank you for joining us.
I can just have you speak for me. You should do an episode.
I'll
where
just jump back between.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
chairs.
And you just splice them together, and it's you pretending to be me.
We'll just switch your shirt out.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go with what'd you like about it? Start there.
Okay, well, I obviously loved the production design. The art direction was just incredible.
Right.
They made it look like the original Alien film, but modernized in the way that I'd like to see it done, where it keeps the style preserved entirely, but it's also just it looks like a new film. Because the original Alien, I mean, it still looks good, but there's definitely parts of it where it's like, okay, this feels like it's it's stuck in its time a little bit. I'm not doing a very good job describing it, but production design is the one thing that I don't know that I could really.
It held a classic look. It did what Abrams did with Force Awakens. It held that classic look while also making it look a lot more modern. It was much more palatable. It didn't look so cheesy, but it kept all the old charm, I guess is the good way to put it.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a real authenticity to the look of the film that was excellent. And I mean, the cinematography was pretty good. There was that one scene where they're going down this hallway and there's weird alien goop along the walls, I guess. And they were freaking out about that when they hadn't even gone down the hallway. And they were like, oh my goodness. And I was like, it's weird alien goop. Does this...
Yeah, nothing moves.
Living. Yeah, nothing moves.
Nothing's in there. They're just like, I'm not going near that.
Oh, no. And anyways, they start going down it, and then they see there's bodies along the walls, and the camera works oh no, oh no, oh no.
It's a little much.
Yeah, it was a bit much. And but outside of that, the other thing I really liked is the one of the lead actors. Andy. He plays the android with them, and he's he kind of follows around Rain, the main character, He's super loyal to her. And he's just excellent. He's just amazing in this movie.
Yep.
He has all these little like brief little snippets where it's like his programming isn't quite matching up or whatever, but he doesn't overuse it. It's just like a little bit early on to give you a sense for like, okay, he's an android who's been a little scuffed up. He doesn't have everything, put together. And then, a little bit into the film, it's slight spoilers. This is a spoiler review, right?
Yeah.
Slight spoilers.
Why not?
So they have to replace his chip with like one of the synthetic androids they find on the ship that they investigate. And when they put that in, then he kind of like shifts a little bit. And he does such a good job of making it sure that it's like still the same like exterior, but the interior motivation has shifted.
Yeah, because these fewer ticks. It's almost like a different person.
Right.
So he has just enough nuance in there to make it feel different and kind of throw you off because you're used to him.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be kind of this, like, I don't know, not terrifying, but unnerving moment, I guess.
Yeah, it's very unsettling because it's loyalties shift.
Right.
And they make good use of that. Or he does, I should say, actually, because it's really just the actor pulling all
he
the
brought
way
it
there.
home. He was easily the one that stood out to me the most in the theater as well. Unfortunately, it's because none of the others do at all. But I mean,
it's partly him. He's just that.
No. I'm saying like even if they were putting in a really good job, like if it was a series of really developed characters and really good actors, which I mean they were good actors, they were just nothing to work with. Even with that, like he stood out. He was just excellent. He did a really great job. I would love to see whatever else he does, just because of how well he performed in this film.
Yeah, but he does elevate the whole movie a good notch. Because without him, then everybody just blurs into just horror movie tropes.
Yeah,
like
unfortunately,
all of them. And so the fact that he could deviate from that was really refreshing. It was like, wow, okay, so I don't know what this character's gonna do.
Right. Yeah, because it did delve too far into the tropey characteristics of just your run-of-the-mill like series of characters that run through, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I knew it had that going against it. But as an Alien film, like it delivered, and I think that's why it has a high rating.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's not a Rotten Disparity episode; it's just a review, and
yeah, because critics and audiences are aligned on this one.
And it, like I said, delivers. Like it's scary, and it's got the xenomorphs, and it's got some interesting new types of creatures and such, and it introduces some new concepts and like developing the Alien franchise or whatever. It felt like, if I were to venture a guess, just like moving outside the movie a little bit, it felt like a very safe re-entry into the franchise where they could potentially push the boundaries a little bit later. So if they, I'm assuming they're going to make sequels off of this.
Very safe.
Yeah. A little too safe, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, that's what we liked about Alien Covenant and Prometheus, was that it really delved into new concepts and tried to expand outside of the horror trope.
Right.
Because, I mean, Alien 1, it did that. It kind of deviated enough to make it interesting, and that's what brought,
The first one?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, deviated from what, though?
It wasn't as tropey for a horror film, and that's what made it interesting. Like, having the protagonist that no one understood was the protagonist until, she survived.
Yeah, that was a good move.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So anyway, this didn't do much of that at all.
Did actually, on that note, did Alien come before The Thing?
The what now?
Carpenter's The Thing.
That's a good question. I don't know. I can actually. Look. Why not?
Yeah, actually, if you could, just because one of the things that, so I've not actually seen The Thing, but one of the things I know that both, keep using the word thing, something that both films do allegedly is that they have the monster keeps changing, and that's a really cool principle to implement because it really shakes up the horror. 82? Oh, it's definitely after then. Aliens is 70s.
Alien was like in the 70s, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 79. Okay, so 79. just after.
Yeah. So it started two things then. Alien did, or at least those are the two things I can think of off the top of my head.
Like the word "the thing." It's the theme of the day, folks.
No more thing. You get your own separate episode later.
Yeah, I know. This is a very informal episode. I will say though, this is the first episode where you have your own chair.
It is.
I've just been making him stand in a squat position. So I've tried to make the episodes as long as
Yes.
possible, so he experiences as much torment as possible.
Mm-hmm.
This time, unfortunately, I had a chair and I didn't have an excuse to make him stand. So here we are.
Well, yeah, because when I entered the room, I saw it and I was like, "Is that a chair?"
I was like, "Dang it! I forgot to take it out of my room before you got here." So, okay, so
Yeah.
all that said, is there anything else you liked about it?
I thought the music was pretty good.
Music is great, by the way. Yeah.
I think there was a moment where they, and this is I guess something that I'm more mixed on, but they have some of the things that happen in that things word. So like the black icky goo stuff from Prometheus and Covenant, they bring that back. It's here and they sort of
Oh, yeah.
merge
Yep.
alien movies. When they discover it though and find it, the music that plays harkens back to one of the themes that plays in Prometheus, which I
Yep.
recognize, and I thought that was a nice little touch with the music. I don't know how I feel about bringing the black icky goo into it, or rather, I'm fine with that. I don't know how I feel about bringing it in and then doing basically nothing with it, which is kind of what they did. I mean, this movie feels like it was 2% world building, 98%
Right.
just
safe alien
safe
movie.
alien horror stuff throughout. And it's very theme parky, which I don't really like. It had all these shots where it's like, turn a monster in your face and and you're just like, you kind of, because it's like, this is where this is going,
Right.
or whatever.
That's fair.
In some cases, they're doing decent blocks. Like, I mean, it's decently well crafted, the storyline, just like independently, which I think is the point that you're going to, is that just taken entirely. Like, if you knew nothing about the alien movies and you just saw this, you'd be like, this was crazy and kind of cool and wicked.
Yeah. Yeah, and it did connect enough to make me like, okay, I might see what you try to do if you take some risks on the sequel.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say that this movie was like groundbreaking anyway. Like, it's very like, okay, I could probably watch this like once a year or something just to introduce some friends to it. But
yeah, I wonder if potential is an interesting subject here, because I feel like sometimes you'll see something and be like, they could go somewhere with this, and then it gets more passes, and I'm more like, do it now.
Fair. That is entirely fair. I think, again, we harken back to this point where Alien Covenant and Prometheus were so guilty of this, where, well, in Covenant, I think more so, just because it was trying too hard to cater because of the response that Prometheus got. Was like, not enough xenomorphs or blah, blah, blah.
Right.
This one went the entirely other direction, where it was like so safe that it was like too much of what they were asking for. And like, I don't want to be this person where it's like, it has to be this fine line where it had to be perfect. But at the same time, it's like, all right, guys, like, when you're making a film and you're trying to make art, you want it to stand out, right? You want it to be unique. You want it to make like a good statement. You want it to make people think about it afterwards. And this one did not do enough of that.
Yeah.
Even with the ideas that it introduced, like the thing at the end, it was really harkening back to the engineers, or whatever they call them, that created man and aliens.
Mm-hmm.
So it did do stuff, like it was nodding at the previous properties.
Yeah.
And, as a standalone film, obviously it does really well. And it does harken back to the first one a lot. And that's the ship that they're exploring. And so, like I said, I mean, it has a lot going for it. And it does have, I think it has decent potential. It's not enough. Like, if I read the script, I'd be like, yeah, okay, give me something better. Like, give me something really unique within this, whatever that idea might be. Give me. It's too generic. Like, it was just too cut and dry.
We're already here. We're already making the movie. I mean, I guess as a soft reset. I mean, this is the same principle that Abrams followed for
Star Wars,
for Star Wars, like to a T, where he basically it's not only we're going back to practical effects and we're going back to just likable characters going on an adventure. He was also like, let's go back and repeat the first film verbatim, and that was way too far. It's like that was a step too much. We didn't need that. You could have just.
And to be fair, he was a little bit more unique than just copy pasting the first film for this movie. Yes,
the Romulus, they did at least some. There was like an effort made to be like, this is an independent movie. You can actually watch, and it does continue the story. It's not a reboot. Like, it's a soft reboot, like to get people back into the Alien franchise, but it wasn't a a reboot narratively. It was trying to take the narrative threads that had already happened and then put them in and to have them make sense and to just do your horror movie thing. And
Right.
so it's kind of like, the inspiration there. I think this is like a more successful execution as opposed to like Force Awakens. That's the seventh one. Yeah. Okay. Because like Force Awakens is just the only like new anomaly they add is Finn. I don't even think Rey's that interesting.
She's not, no.
Because it's like
she was again copy pasted, but without any of the charm of Luke Skywalker because she didn't have the soul there, behind the writing.
Yeah, the actress was fine, but it's like they put all the pressure on just the actress to do everything, and they can't. They need a story.
And they did a little bit of the same here, I think. To your point, to a greater degree of success, just within not just reception, but also actual content. Because like Force Awakens was really well received, but it didn't age very well.
No,
I think this one was well received, and it'll age just the way it became.
I agree.
Like I don't think it's going to decrease or increase in quality over time. Like I don't think there's anything there for it. And that it does suffer from the Rey problem. Like the main character I barely remembered her name. We just watched it, and I was like, "Wait, what was it?" Andy, obviously, they say his name a lot for one. For two, he stands out really well.
Yeah.
And he's a really interesting concept for the world. And so I think the main thing that I liked about this film that I think would fall in that potential category was the fact that the events of the first film, how they affect another group of people within the same universe. Yes. So it kind of like extends, and that's interesting. Just because it's cool to see, what actions will have consequences that you're not involved with. I thought that was cool. I was like, okay. Yeah. I like that because it's the ship just kind of floating and this group goes up to retrieve the fuel from it or something. So like I just like the concept that it has more effects than just what you see on screen, and this kind of gave you a glimpse into that. So I liked that. Andy was great. Like I said, it gave you more of the universe. I think if I'm not mistaken, they were on Mars in the beginning, and it's like terraformed or something. Whatever planet it is, it's a bunch of people that live on this planet, and the Wayland Corporation is kind of like dealing with them, and they have kind of like this weird serfdom type economy.
Yeah, they basically enslaved everybody there.
Exactly. And so that's interesting. It had a lot of that. I was like, I could see more of that, and like
it's the Wayland. It's corporatization taken to its ludicrous, disgusting extreme.
All the way to
now
the extreme,
they just enslave people. They don't call it that,
right?
But they just have all these loopholes that they will finagle, so that way you can never leave and be free.
Right. Yeah, and it did a good job of like explaining that or showcasing that. Aesthetically, it's gorgeous, like you said.
Yeah.
Really liked the practical effects and the set design and the production design, the costumes. Music, I think, was phenomenal. Really liked the soundtrack.
I think what's really fascinating about this movie is that if it had been, like, let's say, take all your memories of all of the Alien movies except for the first one.
Okay.
And just pitch them out the window. They don't exist.
Right.
So you've only seen the first one.
Okay.
If this movie came out and was the second movie that was a follow-up to the first one, I don't think people would like it. I think people would see this as just like, it's just the same movie, but just not as good. But now, after the franchise has been dragged through the mud for so many years and then abandoned and dejected and then brought back and beaten up some more, now so it comes out and
just
everyone
as a response.
I think so.
Okay.
I think that's why it's doing so well, because this is like a 70% at the most generous. I would give it like 60 or something like that. But I think people just sat down and was like, what am I going to have to deal with this time? And it was just like,
this is a pleasant movie.
Yeah, basically. And they were like, well, this has scary alien things in it.
2 thumbs way up. Okay, so then last question then, I guess.
Okay.
So what would your score be, like, officially?
Yeah, so mine, well, if it's 100%, I give it like a 60. If I'm doing a star system, which I like best, then I would do 3 out of 5. It's like perfectly passable entertainment.
Yeah. It is a very much popcorn flick.
Yeah.
Like, just hardcore just stays in that, doesn't deviate, like, stays within the formula.
Yeah, and we're saying that because, like, the camera stuff where they're like, oh, look at this freakish thing. And then instances where characters do really dumb things.
Yeah.
Repeatedly. And then you've got your character who's got to stick up his butt, and we have to follow and listen to him ad nauseum for like half the movie until something finally kills him, and we're like, finally. And then when they die, they always do dumb things. Like there's like that guy, or one of them. He like attacks this alien when it's in this egg sac or whatever on the wall, and then it like spits some acid on him. He's like, ow, ow. Or actually, not even that. No, it hits him with its stinger, and he's like, ah, and he like
it
falls
like
over.
flips up and hits like his eye or something.
Yeah,
and so
and
he
he's
just
like,
kind of falls over and was like laying under it, and then the acid just like drips on him.
Yeah,
and he
then
just
he's
kind of dies quietly. He's like,
it was so casual. I'd have been like, and then like rolled out of the way or something, and it hit him. He was just like, and then he's like watching his fingers like disintegrate, and he's like, ah. I was like, dude, our reaction
no
time
self-preservation
is so
whatsoever. Like, I guess I'm done for. It got my eye already. I can't.
It's too late.
Can't live with just one eye. I'm just gonna let it go. I guess I'm just gonna die.
There's no hope for me.
Yeah, because the acid. Yeah, you're right. It hits him like in the arm, and then he like wipes it off his face or something, and it's like burning. He's like,
It's like, just roll out of the way.
Just move.
It's not flicking acid at
Well,
you. It's just dripping out.
Because I think it would have been more because he does die really casually and doesn't really affect you because you're like, you're not gonna scream or yell, run.
Well, he was a tough guy.
Yeah, I
at the
guess.
very beginning of the movie.
Well, here's the thing. Because it would have been interesting to see that devolve. That would have like increased the horror, right? Because if he starts dragging himself away, his like eyes all messed up, and
he's like crawling,
and then the alien pops out, and then it gets him.
Yeah,
like maybe it like leans down and like little mouths his head or something,
or it's kind of crawling, and then it's like, well, I guess it doesn't drool acid, but that'd be
no,
cool.
but he's got the little mouth. That's like the thing, right? So if he like, goes up and like holds him down and gets him real quick,
then
it's like okay, and then you kind of you introduce the alien properly. And then, kind of introduce like what it's able to do. Then it's, anyway, so they didn't do that. It was just kind of this casual death. And then it comes out and chases this other character, which it was good enough. Like there's nothing wrong with that. It really, for some reason, just did not have an impact of a death or of any horrifying significance. It was just kind of like,
no, not at all.
It's like, oh, it's my I got to get out of this movie now. Just got to like roll off stage left here.
Yeah.
Not impactful.
I know. And this is the character that you probably wanted to see die the most because he was the most obnoxious. And so he dies, and how he died was fine. It's just his reaction of just so like. But there were a couple other characters who I felt similarly about, where the reaction was just like delayed, or they weren't really freaked out. Like they had someone who got like the face hugger on them, and they're like, ah! And they like fall over, and then everybody's like, I'd have been like, I'd have flipped my lid. I'd have pissed my pants.
What is that?
Just like, there's like one character who does like the mouth covering thing. I was like, okay, someone react to this fuckish thing. And then they're trying to figure out what to do, and they're having this slow conversation, and you can see it like pulsating on her face. It's like, well, give us something now. Give us something now.
Everyone's like, I guess we'll leave it on her. It's part of her now.
Oh, just
it's here now.
Well, let's think about what we could do. Let's do something. Give me an answer now.
Well, that was the interesting thing about Prometheus.
Yeah.
When it like wraps around his arm. That's what it was, his arm. So it's like it's sitting there, and then the other guy like cuts it off.
Well,
and
but
then
he's like, get it off.
Right.
Like, okay, I'm gonna get it off. So that's what I expect.
How you react to those type of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. It had a couple of those moments, unfortunately. Like I said, the cast was good. It just
I didn't think any of them were bad actors.
I think there was moments where people were just unsure of how to properly portray the emotion of the scene.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I guess I could kind of throw a bone for it, because initially when it was happening in the movie, so they go in the ship, and then there's this cryogenic. They need to get the cryogenic fuel,
right?
Whatever. So they go in to try to
MacGuffin,
get those.
If you will.
Yeah, they need to get the MacGuffin, but it matters that it's cryogenic, freezing, like antifreeze or whatever, and
that's what it is.
Exactly. As they're getting it, this is where they keep all the aliens, which I don't know how they had so many of these face huggers in there, but they had like 1 billion face huggers, stored in there, and then they defrost, and so then they wake up, and then they come out in the water, and they're attacking them. You probably saw it from the trailer. The trailer spoiled it, basically everything. But anyways, they're fighting them, and they're literally fighting them. Like the facehugger's like on them, and they're like, oh, I'm gonna like push it off. And when I watched the first one, and especially the second movie, Aliens, like if a facehugger's on you, you're dead. And they made that really clear. And in Aliens, the only one who survives it, if I remember right, is Sigourney Weaver's character, and she does the kind of blocking it. But that's because she knew what had happened. Like she kind of had some prior, interaction with this nightmarish thing. So I could buy that a little more. And they drag that scene out a long time. So it's just the one in the room, and it's just her, and like it's just this terrifying claustrophobic nightmare. In this one, it didn't feel quite like that because they're like whacking these things as they come jumping out from the water.
Yeah, he's almost got a bat and just like, swing away, Meryl, swing away.
Swing away. And I just didn't really buy that. I was like, they had to weaken the facehuggers a little bit so that these nincompoops can actually keep up. But to the film's credit, if you're new and you've not seen an alien movie before, you'd be looking at this going, what are these things trying to do?
It's fair.
Assuming you hadn't seen the trailer and been spoiled.
The trailer really did spoil so much.
Oh, it spoiled everything.
Even the cover itself tells you who gets killed right away.
Like, yeah, it's just like this person dies. And this is how they die. And this is what's going to happen after they die. And you're like, okay, thanks.
Appreciate that. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah. But I mean, like I said, to its credit, the mystery of not knowing what's going to happen, I think, is maybe to the film's credit as opposed to like a detractor. Like for me and everybody who's familiar with the series, yeah, I guess we know. But I mean, that's like a small one I'd be willing to forgive, because I think it does appeal to newer audiences and does kind of build suspense, or it could. It would be interesting to hear a new person's perspective, not knowing anything about the other movies and just watching this.
Yeah, that's fair. Because it is a reintroduction. I mean, for any of those that aren't like the nerd community that really knows all about the xenomorphs and alien and stuff, if you're just going to see that and that's your first movie, I mean, it'll do its job.
And I wouldn't say it's a bad one to start on. I do think the original, of course, is the best. But if a second best, I honestly would probably say this one, quite frankly.
Fair.
Just because, I don't know, it does.
It's just a good open doorway. It's a good introduction. Yeah,
it's just a really self-contained, solid picture. And, it's not the, I don't want to rag on like its shortcomings too much. I mean, for the most part, it's there. It even does like all the things you would expect. Like, for example, they get these guns, and then they're like, well, you can't shoot the aliens because then it'll like, the acid will like bleed through the floor, and then they'll suck out all the air, and then we'll all die. And I was just like, well, then why do we have these guns? He's like, well, you might be able to threaten it off. And I was like, they're not going to take that as a threat. Like, you pointing like a plastic. Okay, whatever, sure. Anyways, it does work to some extent, and they do get to fire the things. They end up figuring out a loophole of some sort. Which
they do obey the rule of Chekhov's gun.
Yeah, which that's what I'm saying. Like, they obey the rule of Chekhov's gun, check. And then at the very beginning of the movie, it's like hero is reluctant, check,
Right.
So they do a number of things to make sure, like it is a decently thought out structurally. It's very sound, and I think that's why, like on some level, why it's always going to work, and why that you can only be so harsh on this movie, because ultimately, it is doing a lot of things right, and it even has some good emotional bits. Like there's that one. I know I'm talking too much, but I'll leave it here. So there's that one scene where they want Andy to help them open the store because he has like permission because he's an android to save somebody. But then he sees that there's a xenomorph in the room with them, and he says, they're a goner. That thing is waiting for me to open the door so that we can all die.
Yeah.
So now I'm not going to do it. And they get super upset. They get super emotional. But this is following a recent scene where Andy had interacted with another android, and he was like, oh, humans are too emotional, and that's going to get in the way, so you have to be focused on what we're supposed to do here. But it was interesting that it is the right call. It keeps the two of them alive, or the three of them alive. And it's not just because he's serving the Wayland Corporation, because now he's kind of, his loyalties are switched.
Right.
It's also just an interesting conversation, a point about like how being cruel at least in this scenario, actually preserved life. And I mean, maybe they could have opened the door and brought her in and then closed it. Probably not. That thing's pretty fast. But it was.
Well,
I thought
that's
that was
the
an
thing.
interesting. I thought that was a really strong moment in the film.
Yeah, and that's one of the arguments from like iRobot, for instance, where that jumps in because there's a car accident in the movie, and Will Smith's character is trapped in one of the cars, and they go into this river, and then there's a 7-year-old girl, and the other one, or 12-year-old girl, whatever. So it's a child.
Yeah.
In the other car, and so the robot jumps in and using statistical data knows that there's more of a chance of survival for Will Smith's character than there is for the little girl. And so it jumps in and saves him. However, it doesn't take into account like survivor's guilt and how what effect that's going to have on the family of the little girl, etc.
Right.
And so it brings up this interesting argument of like what is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And so the probability of that thing getting in and killing everybody was higher or too high for them to evaluate whether it was a good idea to open the door and try and save this one character. It's either 1 or 4. And so, again, it's a moral quandary, right? Because you want this person to be saved. She has a personal connection with a couple of these characters, some more than others, and so it makes you like, well, what is the right thing? Do you try, even though the risk is really high, or do you just say the risk is too great, we can't?
Yeah.
And so the android's there to remove the emotion and say, I'm going to make the decision that we can't. So anyway, there's certain parts like that are good enough. Like,
well, and one other thing in that scene too is that he says something. If I remember right, he said like, "Well, there's 2 of us, there's 1 of her," and then she counters and saying like, "But she's pregnant, so there is 2 of them," and so the numbers are fair, like they are evened out here.
But the risk is still great to where we're either losing 2 or 4, not 2 or 2.
But that was interesting where she counteracted him with a pretty good logical argument on paper, and it was still like not going to work.
Just within a mathematical realm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it was a good highlight of the movie for sure.
It was. Yeah, so that and the android.
Yeah, Andy's character, 2 thumbs up.
So I guess I hesitate to ask this just because I don't know how much worth it is in a review, but if you were to fix it, would you or would you even?
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know. I guess like it depends on, like, if I'm a producer, I probably would have looked at that and been like, looks like a blockbuster.
Yeah, it's gonna rake in movie or money.
A theme park ride. Go for it.
Yeah.
But if I was, a director or the writer or something like that, I'd be a little more critical, and I think I would probably. I don't know. I guess it's tough. I'm not sure that. I guess I might question the necessity to bring in the Prometheus and Covenant film, which I know probably is like. I know there's interesting things from there, but like the black icky goo was not the interesting part of those movies.
That's fair.
You know what I mean? The interesting part was David.
To be fair, that black icky goo, given its like ambiguity and purpose, giving it a purpose in this movie, it just accomplished that too.
Yeah.
And said, hey, we'll give it a reason since it seemed to be kind of amorphous in the films. But you're right. I mean, it's more of a question of like, do you need to? Probably not.
Yeah, because it sort of just is like it's opening up a can of worms of a bunch of questions.
Sure.
Which, if you have the prior films knowledge, then you're somewhat aware of them. If you don't, then just put that lid on, and you're not going to really know.
Yeah. The problem with that too is that it intentionally moves away from those films. So it's like, well, if you're gonna nod at them, why don't you just make the sequel that those who like those 2 movies wanted in the first place?
Yeah.
I understand that it's not going to have the broad appeal that this one did, but. Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point.
Yeah, and I probably would have kept someone on board the ship and put them in cryosleep, and then they wake them up. Someone who just managed to survive. I would have done that.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
And then I would have had them be in a precarious position. I think that could have been interesting.
Like
to toy
bordering
with.
On madness, essentially.
Maybe. I'm not sure how I would execute them. I just think that would have been a fascinating discovery, and it would have given us another body count. So that way it would have changed up who you thought was going to live.
Yeah, because it did have a low body count.
Yeah.
It was a very few characters in there, so you
knew they were all going to die except for like,
and you knew that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So that's like that's too obvious. So I would have done that just to shake things up. And then I think in terms of the world building, I think I would have liked to see a little more. I don't know what I would have added, just because then that requires me to actually think about the world and do a deep dive. But I would have liked a little bit more. I mean, they talked about a few things. I like that shot at the very beginning where it's just her sitting in this like grassy patch and the sun's rising, and then you realize she waking up from a dream. That was a nicely handled moment, because it sort of establishes visually what's important to her. And it would have been interesting to kind of play with like, what's this place that she's going to? Does it actually look that way or not? I also thought, and then I'm going to throw the question back to you, but I also thought it was interesting that in the end of Covenant, there's like characters in cryosleep with like terror around them. Yes. And in this one, they put someone in cryosleep who's not safe. But then the cryostasis pod rejects them and is like, nope.
Don't want that in here.
So I thought that was almost like them taking a little jab at the other.
It might have been.
Like,
I
you
wonder.
should have delivered on that.
I wonder.
I don't know.
But
what would you have done to? And actually, maybe like start off. I'm going to do the 3 questions you've asked me. So, what score would you give it? And then, would you change anything, or would you not? If so, what would you change?
So I'd probably give it around. Yeah, I'd probably give it a solid like 75%. I mean, it's sitting at 80, I think, right now.
Yeah.
For audiences and critics, to be fair, they were pretty much in alignment this one.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I probably aligned it there just because it is just a solid film. I mean,
yeah,
it's not risky enough for me to be artistically interested in or invested, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's really watchable. It's fun. It's a good popcorn film, like I said. So I mean, it's one of those you can just throw on with a group of friends and not have to worry about anybody getting lost or confused. It's just really self-contained.
It's a good party movie, yeah.
It is, yeah. And then you asked if I would fix anything, and if so, what I would fix. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. I've had some time to think about this. I couldn't figure it out. I guess just because it's just a solid movie, so like, there's not anything I would change necessarily in it.
Okay.
I probably would have, like, if I were writing the thing, I probably would have made him a little bit more nuanced characters.
That would have been refreshing.
Yeah, just to give them a little something, because I'm like, this is really generic. Like, they don't flesh them out at all. They're just like, they all have the same ambition to get off this planet, and that's the drive that gets them on the ship, and that's it. That's all you get.
And their relationships between each other were highly suspect, because some of them are just so different that you're like, how do you 2 of you get along like in an ordinary setting?
Well, that, and yeah, like, you don't have, I mean, the world that they come from is pretty harsh, and that's why they're trying to escape it. So you're like, well, maybe they're just forced together by common interest at this point. But they also don't flesh that out. So like, there's not enough to go on.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the main characters, not enough. So I probably would have given them more and made it a lot more ambiguous as to who is going to die. I mean, I might have even tried to like create more survivors.
Yeah.
Or no survivors. I mean, I thought it would have been interesting. You brought up a point before we started, like, wouldn't it be interesting if just the android made it? I was like, yeah, I thought that would have been a bold move. And
it's different too, because Andy is not like David.
Right.
He's actually a good guy. So I know David survives, but it's like following the villain's perspective, basically. And this wouldn't have been that. It would have been the good guy, but he would have been. It would have been fascinating to see him try to talk to people and explain the situation and have because they established early on that there's a lot of people don't like androids, and they like ridicule him, they make fun of him, they pick on him.
Yeah.
And knowing that that's where they're going with it, if he has to go back and explain, they're not going to believe him.
Sure.
And so they would set him up like Ripley,
Oh, interesting, because now it's the android side of Ripley. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, another thing that would have been interesting is, let's say he survives, and then somehow he gets data from like Mother or something.
Yeah.
And finds out about David, and he can go search him out or something. Then it could be like this interesting rivalry tale between, a tale of 2 androids, essentially. But that would have been interesting, like connecting that, because then you could bring in the Covenant franchise, the Covenant Prometheus.
That might be a little more organic, doing it that way too. And you're certainly bringing out the best part of it because Michael Fassbender was awesome.
He was really great. It would have been really cool to see him again. I mean, maybe they will, but yeah, I don't know. I'd probably do something along those lines. Just because of what it is, there's not much to say about whether I would change something or not. It's
I see what you're saying. It's
You
sort
know,
of like its
it's not unique
ambition
enough.
was like its ambition was like low tier.
It's very
so
low.
It's hard to
Yeah.
Whereas like, and I think this is partly why maybe we're so critical of like James Cameron's Avatar because the ambition is huge for that movie, but the story is so flat and generic. So imagine like and
Foreshadowing
it doesn't
to the next review, guys.
I know. It doesn't take much for you to start to envision what Avatar those movies could have been like and how they could have had nuance, how they could have had interesting elements to play with.
Right.
And he just refuses all of them. He's just like, no,
this is the way.
This is the story, and that's it. Humans bad. And but with like this movie, it's a much harder because it's so inoffensive, right? It doesn't try to do anything more. And so if you ask for more, you kind of feel like puts you in an uncomfortable position of being the jerk who says you're not good enough,
Yeah, because I mean, it is a perfectly passable film, just and it does exist within the context of Alien. That's the problem with it, is that like it's not trying anything new. It's just like, here's another one. And it's like, I mean, you can only go so far with that. Eventually, people will get sick of it, and that's the problem. Is that people don't realize that until they are sick of it, and so you got to cater to this.
Well, they can't do it again.
No, you can't. I mean, like I said, you have to go in a direction that's more unique, and like that's the way I would go, is having Andy like go and look for David to confront him or something, just to kind of, because then you can get back into the philosophical aspect of the films and maybe have their like back and forth. That would be interesting to me anyway. That's what I would do. I don't know. Like I said, it is such an inoffensive movie, like you were saying, that it's just there's not much to say there. So anyway.
Yeah, I might have slowed it down a little bit too. The first Alien movie is actually fairly slow. It takes a long time, and it has,
as is Ridley Scott's way.
Yeah, but also the things that are horrifying in that movie are genuinely horrifying.
Right.
So he gives you like this much film of horror, and then it's this much like context and processing and development and all this other stuff. I'd be interested. I think I would be fascinated with a structural Alien movie that does that. But in order to do that, it's like you can't rely so much on the xenomorph and the face huggers. You need to do new things.
Which is what Prometheus did, which I thought
it did really
effectively.
I like this movies, because it's like they were trying to do some newer stuff with it. This one like has like one vaguely new thing, but it's really just bringing in like elements from the different Alien movies. So you're sort of like...
Yeah,
but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Like it would have been interesting because they, not that it's poorly paced, I think it's fine, but it is a little bit like, oh, you're impregnated with a xenomorph. Okay, now it's breaking out of your chest. Now you're dead. Okay, now it's and it's like, oh,
spoilers. Gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Ridley has this really great, and that's one of the reasons why it's more interesting on a character level, because he's able to build those characters with that time that he spends. Because he does this like real slow ascent. And then once you crest it, though, you're like, it's downhill the whole rest of the movie. He always does that.
Yeah.
And he did that really effectively with those movies.
That is interesting. That is his style, isn't it?
Yep.
In a lot of cases.
And I noticed that on the rewatch of Prometheus. I was like, what is that tie there? I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because he does world building, he does establishment of characters, and he does just like, I mean, he also really indulges you with the visuals of the film, which is great.
Yeah.
But he does this slow rise tension, and then it breaks, like, because it is that crest. That crest is always really effective. And in the first one, it was the breaking out of the chest. It was like, because the face hugger's scary, but it's really that moment when it breaks out, and then this new thing arrives, and you're like, it's that unsurety of how do we deal with this? What is it? Where is it? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it is just like this cat and mouse game on the ship, and so it's just like I said, it's like you're going down the whole rest of the film, this descent, until some resolution is found.
Yeah, because I mean, he like part of the power of the original Alien is the fact that there's only one. When Cameron comes in for the second movie, he's like, well, there's got to be more. I don't know what to do with just one. So it's got to be bigger. It's got to be more explosive. We need people with guns.
And
people with guns
moving,
have to shoot these things.
They were moving much more into that 80s action phase. So they're like, well, I got to make that too. So
yeah, and like this one is like, I need more. I need more of them for this to be scary. And I do think there's something very commendable about the original Alien and the fact that Scott is able to say, one. I can do it with one.
Yeah.
I don't need anything more. And,
Fair. Well, any further thoughts? Any closing?
no. That you said all my thoughts, remember?
I did, yeah. I just came out the gate and was like, I don't need you.
Do you have any other further thoughts?
I don't. No, I enjoyed it. I mean, 2 thumbs up, I guess.
Yeah,
Or
it
1
was
thumb
fun.
up, I guess. It was passable. I'm interested to see where they go with it. If they go somewhere great with it, then, if they actually try to be unique with the next subsequent films, then great.
Likewise, yeah. I
But-
think that would be cool to see if they do something new.
Yeah. Yeah. Other than that, this has been the HolmFront's review of Alien Romulus. Thank you for watching.